My photos were gone, every single one, as if I'd never existed. I stood frozen in front of the family display wall, blank pins where my face used to be. No Christmas, no graduation, not even my wedding. Then Father raised his glass and smiled, announcing he was handing everything to my brother. 3 days' notice. No explanation. Just gone. My aunt wouldn't meet my eyes. My brother smirked and whispered, "You were always just a placeholder." But what they didn't know? Mother's cedar chest was waiting at home, with every secret they tried to bury. I didn't reply out of weakness. I replied, "Received," because silence is just the sound before the storm. My name is Emily Dalton, and I'm 45 years old. Since Mother's death, I've been the one holding our family together with holiday dinners and meticulous planning from my suburban colonial home. The sharp scent of lemon cleaner fills my kitchen as I wipe down counters, checking items off my reunion prep list while my phone buzzes with messages. My father Richard's warmth has been fading for years, each holiday dinner growing quieter, while my younger brother Marcus positions himself closer to discussions about inheritance and property. But they don't know about Mother's cedar chest in my attic, the one I've spent years organizing, every document and letter carefully preserved, just as she left them. Dad thinks I'm just the reliable daughter with the casseroles and calendars, but Mother Linda trusted me with more than recipes. Some legacies run deeper than blood. I was wiping down the kitchen counter for the 3rd time when my phone buzzed. The August heat pressed against the windows, making the lemon cleaner's scent sharper, almost acidic. My father's name lit up the screen, and for a moment I felt that old flutter of hope. Maybe he'd finally noticed all the reunion prep work I'd been doing. But hope has a way of turning bitter fast. "Don't bother coming to the family reunion." 5 words. That's all it took to knock the air from my lungs. The phone trembled in my hand as I read it again, searching for some hidden meaning, some mistake. You know that feeling when your whole world tilts sideways, but you're expected to keep standing straight? I typed back 1 word. Received. Professional. Controlled. Like I was acknowledging a canceled dentist appointment instead of being exiled from my own family. The counter's cool tile pressed against my palms as I leaned forward, forcing steady breaths through the sting in my chest. Mother's voice whispered in my memory, "Check the facts, not the faces, Emily." She'd taught me that during my first heartbreak at 16, when Tommy Mitchell was caught kissing Sarah Jensen behind the gym. "People's expressions lie," she'd said, dabbing my tears with her sleeve that smelled of fabric softener and coffee. "Their actions tell the real story." Right then, I made my decision. I wasn't going to just disappear like some shameful family secret. I needed to see what had changed, what had pushed my father to this point. The reunion was happening whether I was welcome or not, and I'd be there to witness it. The drive to the venue felt like an out-of-body experience. You ever notice how familiar roads become strange when your mind's somewhere else entirely? I rehearsed my lines like an actor, preparing for an unwanted role. "Hello, everyone. Beautiful evening, isn't it? Neutral. Pleasant." The green bean casserole sat in the passenger seat. My usual contribution, steam still fogging the aluminum foil cover. A peace offering, maybe. Or just my stubborn refusal to break tradition. The sunset painted the community center parking lot in shades of amber when I pulled in. I recognized every vehicle: Uncle Pete's rusty pickup, Aunt Margaret's sensible Volvo, my brother's shiny new Mercedes. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Funny how the most ordinary things can suddenly feel like a gauntlet you have to run. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing my chestnut hair and pinching color into my cheeks. "Observe first," I whispered to myself. "React later. Document everything." Mother's methodology, applied to a situation she never could have imagined. The casserole dish was warm against my ribs as I approached the entrance. Music and laughter spilled out, the normal sounds of our family gatherings that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. I pulled open the heavy door, plastering on my most practiced smile. The conversation died like someone had hit a mute button. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some surprised, some uncomfortable, some deliberately looking away. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. I headed for the display wall, needing something familiar to ground me. Every year, we'd add new photos to our family timeline. Births, graduations, weddings, all arranged in neat chronological order. Mother had started the tradition 20 years ago, and I'd maintained it after she passed. But I stopped cold 3 steps from the wall. Something was wrong. The timeline looked different, incomplete. That's when I realized what had changed. Every photo with my face in it was gone. Family Christmas cards missing my usual spot on the end. Group shots mysteriously cropped. Graduation photos vanished entirely. They hadn't just uninvited me from the reunion, they were erasing me from our history. The display wall swam before my eyes, that blank strip where my photos should have been hitting me like a physical blow. You know that moment when your brain refuses to process what you're seeing? That's where I was, staring at the flared pushpin that had once held my high school graduation picture. Now it pierced nothing but air. A low ringing started in my ears, like someone had struck a tuning fork inside my head. Across the room, Aunt Margaret, usually my strongest ally, suddenly found the punch bowl fascinating. Her silver-streaked head remained bowed, shoulders tense beneath her flowered blouse. That's when I knew this wasn't some casual oversight. I forced myself to breathe, to observe like Mother had taught me. The room felt both familiar and foreign, like walking through your own house during a power outage. Father worked the crowd with practiced ease, his silver hair catching the overhead lights as he moved from group to group. He laughed at Uncle Pete's jokes, complimented Cousin Sarah's new haircut, asked about little Tommy's baseball season, all while carefully maintaining his orbit far from where I stood. The details started jumping out at me then, little things that set off warning. Bells. A thick black binder sat prominently near the refreshment table, legal-sized and important-looking. My brother kept touching his new watch, had to be at least 5 figures worth of Swiss engineering, while shooting meaningful glances at Father. The cousins huddled in corners, voices dropping whenever I drifted close enough to hear. Something was definitely brewing. The air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. I moved toward the food, table, casserole dish steady in my hands despite the trembling I felt inside. Father stood near the punch bowl, and I couldn't avoid him without making it obvious. "Hello, Dad," I said, sliding my dish between Aunt Janet's brownies and Uncle Pete's famous 7-layer dip. "Beautiful evening." He gave me the kind of nod you'd give a casual acquaintance at the grocery store. Polite, distant, deliberately crafted to convey message without mess. That moment, I knew for certain. My missing photos weren't an accident. This was orchestrated, planned, precise. The foyer arch provided the perfect vantage point, close enough to hear any announcements, far enough to observe reactions. I positioned myself there, back straight, face neutral, like I belonged. Mother's voice echoed in my memory. Sometimes the best way to hear the truth is to become part of the furniture. The scent of her perfume, vanilla and jasmine, seemed to float past, so real I almost turned to look for her. My brother's expensive leather shoes squeaked against the hardwood as he crossed to the refreshment table. He picked up that mysterious binder, nodding at Father with the kind of significance that made my stomach clench. Father cleared his throat, moving to stand near the fireplace where he always made his annual reunion speeches. "If I could have everyone's attention," he called out, wearing the same smile he used for business presentations. The room quieted, faces turning expectantly toward him. I pressed my shoulder against the archway's solid wood, bracing myself for whatever came next. The ringing in my ears got louder as conversations died down. Brother's hand rested possessively on the binder's cover, his new watch glinting in the warm light. Through the windows, I could see the sun setting. Behind the trees, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. The moment stretched like pulled taffy, sweet and dangerous. Father straightened his tie, another tell, one I recognized from countless family meetings. He was about to announce something big, something that would change everything, and judging by the blank spaces on that wall where my life used to be, I had a feeling I knew exactly where this was headed. After much consideration, Father began, his voice carrying that formal tone he used for important pronouncements. I've decided it's time for some necessary updates to the estate planning. You know that moment when you can feel something bad coming, but you're powerless to stop it? That's where I was, watching Father straighten his already straight tie. The room had gone quiet enough to hear the ice cubes settling in the punch bowl. For the sake of clarity and continuity, he continued, all assets will pass directly to Thomas. He gestured toward my brother, who stood there clutching that black binder like it was made of gold. The reaction rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Aunt Janet's sharp intake of breath, Uncle Pete's awkward shuffle of feet, Cousin Sarah's nervous cough. Papers rustled as Thomas flipped open the binder, his eyes fixed on me, waiting for the explosion, the scene, the drama. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I thought about Mother's careful handwriting on those sealed envelopes tucked away in her cedar chest at home. The ones I'd catalogued but never opened, respecting her privacy even after death. Her scent, vanilla and jasmine, seemed to wrap around me again, steadying me. Have you ever felt your whole world shift sideways while everyone watches? The trick is to plant your feet and pretend the floor isn't moving. When? I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. Amazing how one small word can carry so much weight. Father checked his watch, the same model as Thomas's new one, I noticed, and replied, Monday morning. The papers are ready. 3 days. He was giving me 3 days' notice before legally erasing me from the family legacy. The math was simple. Today was Friday, the reunion would wrap up Sunday, and Monday morning would seal it all in black and white. Thomas stepped closer, that smirk still playing on his lips. Don't take it personally, sis, he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. You were always just a placeholder anyway. Placeholder. The word stamped itself across my heart like a rejection letter. All those years of family dinners, holiday preparations, careful attention to everyone's needs and preferences, reduced to temporary space filler. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but kept my expression neutral. Mother's voice echoed in my head. The best revenge is making them think they haven't hurt you. So I smiled, thin and polite as tissue paper, and nodded at Father. Thank you for the clarity, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. The porch welcomed me like an old friend. I gripped the familiar railing, its white paint smooth under my fingers from years of similar moments. The evening air carried the scent of late summer, cut grass, charcoal from someone's barbecue, the sweet decay of fallen leaves that always came early to our neighborhood. 3 days, 72 hours to uncover whatever truth lay behind this sudden shift. My fingers tightened on the railing as pieces started clicking into place. Thomas's expensive watch, Father's rushed timeline, that carefully prepared binder full of papers that would rewrite our family's future. Behind me, through the windows, I could hear the murmur of conversations resuming, the clink of ice in glasses, the artificial normalcy of people pretending they hadn't just witnessed an execution, but standing there in the growing darkness. I felt something else taking shape, not panic or despair, but the beginning of a plan. Mother's voice came back to me, clear as if she stood beside me. Check the facts, not the faces. The cedar chest waited at home, full of documents I'd never fully examined. 3 days suddenly felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat. I straightened my shoulders, releasing my death grip on the railing. Through the window, I could see Thomas holding court near the fireplace, Father nodding approvingly at whatever he was saying. Let them think they'd won this round. Let them believe I'd accept this quiet execution of my place in the family. I kept my phone's voice memo running the whole drive home, narrating every detail while it was fresh. You never know what small observation might matter later. Father wore his negotiation tie, the blue striped one from closing deals. Thomas changed watches between appetizers and the announcement. Janet kept glancing at her phone during Father's speech. Need to, verify if she knew beforehand. The streets were empty, just yellow pools of streetlight every few yards. My headlights caught a stray cat darting across the road, black and white, like the situation I was facing. Everything was becoming that stark. Ever notice how your childhood home feels different at night? Mine loomed ahead, dark except for the porch light I'd left on. The shadows seemed deeper, like they were hiding secrets I needed to find. I parked in the garage, still recording. Time is 11:42 p.m. Car mileage logged at return, 157,843. Reunion food untouched except by Cousin Sarah's kids. Father's announcement timing, approximately 7:15 p.m. The attic stairs creaked under my feet. They always did. Third step from the top being the loudest. Mother's cedar chest sat where it had for decades, under the dormer window. Moonlight filtered through, making the brass hardware gleam. When I lifted the lid, that familiar cedar scent rushed out, mixed with old paper and something distinctly Mother, maybe traces of her perfume still lingering after all these years. Remember how your grandmother's closet had that specific smell you'd know anywhere? This was like that, but with purpose behind it. Time is 11:55 p.m. I spoke into the phone. Opening Mother's cedar chest, contents appear undisturbed since last inventory. I'd cataloged everything years ago, right after she passed. Each folder labeled in my neat handwriting, bank records 1985-1990, personal correspondence, property deeds. But it was the envelope marked Estate Plan Original that drew my attention first. The paper felt delicate under my fingers as I spread everything out under my table lamp. Mother's handwriting covered the margins. She'd been a compulsive note-taker, thank God. Red flags jumped out immediately. Check Marcus Casino markers. And there, underlined twice, no encumbrances for gambling. You know that moment when scattered puzzle pieces suddenly show you the picture? That's what her notes were doing. I grabbed my phone again. Documentation phase beginning, using Scanner Pro app, highest resolution. Each document got its own scan, then a photo backup. Mother's system was meticulous. Dates, amounts, cross-references. She'd left a trail of breadcrumbs, probably never imagining I'd need to follow them. My hand shook slightly as I set my alarm for 6 a.m. The library opened at 7. They had a professional-grade scanner that could handle delicate papers. I started a list on my notepad. The ledger entries were like reading a story in numbers, regular transfers to an account labeled PM Holdings. The amounts grew over time, 5 figures, then 6. But it was a notation in Mother's hand that made my breath catch. Marcus confirms marker account active. I knew that name. Marcus Chen, Father's golf buddy, who happened to work at Desert Palms Casino. The same Marcus who'd been at every family gathering until last Christmas, when Thomas had that mysterious business emergency in Vegas. My phone buzzed, breaking my concentration. I reached for it, careful not to disturb the spread of papers under the lamp's glow. The memory of Mother bent over these same documents floated back, her reading glasses perched on her nose, that concerned crease between her eyebrows. Always keep clean records, she'd told me once. Paper has a longer memory than people. Looking at her careful notes now, I realized she'd been right. Paper does remember. And sometimes it remembers things people desperately want forgotten. The Sunrise Diner looked exactly like it had when Mother used to bring me here after doctor appointments. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee-stained menus, same industrial hum from the kitchen. It was 7:30 a.m., and except for a sleepy trucker at the counter, Aunt Margaret and I had the place to ourselves. You ever notice how early morning light makes everything feel more honest? Like the world hasn't had time to put its mask on yet? I ordered your usual, Aunt Margaret said as I slid into the booth. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast? Some things never change. I pulled out my expandable file folder, organized by date and transaction type, but other things definitely have. The coffee maker hissed behind the counter, and our waitress, her name tag said, Darlene, brought over 2 steaming mugs. I waited until she'd moved away before spreading the first set of photocopies across the table. This is what I found in Mother's cedar chest last night. I tapped the estate planning document. And this, sliding over the ledger copies, shows where things started going sideways. Aunt Margaret adjusted her reading glasses, the ones that hung from a chain around her neck, just like Mother's used to. Walk me through it, Emily. Father's pushing through will changes on Monday morning. Everything goes to Thomas. I kept my voice steady, professional. But look at these. Transfers, starting 3 months before Mother's memorial. Aunt Margaret's finger traced the column of numbers, and I watched her face change. You know that look people get when they're connecting dots they wish they couldn't see? That's what crossed her features. 6 figures, she murmured. To PM Holdings, Marcus Chen's company, Thomas's favorite casino contact. I spread out more papers. These are Thomas's marker records from Desert Palms. The amounts match Margaret, down to the dollar. Our eggs arrived, but neither of us touched them. Aunt Margaret's coffee cup clinked against her saucer, the first time I'd ever seen her hands unsteady. Your mother explicitly prohibited gambling payoffs. She jabbed her finger at Mother's handwritten note. She was crystal clear about that. Which makes Father's changes not just cruel, but fraudulent. Aunt Margaret finished my thought. He's using Linda's estate to cover Thomas's debts, then trying to hand him everything else before anyone notices. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, striping our evidence in bars of light and shadow. I pulled out my day planner, old school like Mother taught me, and opened to the weekend calendar. We have 72 hours. I checked my watch. Less, actually. The signing is Monday at 9 a.m. Aunt Margaret grabbed her own notebook. First step is bank records. I'm still on Linda's accounts as co-executor. We can get official histories. I'll handle the attorney angle, I wrote as I talked. Mother's original lawyer retired, but his son took over the practice. He'll remember the estate restrictions. We need everything documented, witnessed, and absolutely bulletproof. Aunt Margaret's voice had that steel edge I remembered from childhood scoldings. No room for denial or interpretation. Already started. I patted my phone. Everything's recorded, photographed, and backed up to 3 different clouds. We sketched out hour-by-hour assignments. Bank opens at 9, law office at 10, county records department until 5. Every minute counted. I'll front the record request fees, I said, pulling up my banking app. Most are under $50, but they add... The error message stopped me cold. Account access temporarily restricted. Please contact your local branch. I tried my savings account. Same message. The joint household account I shared with Father? Account closed. He's frozen you out, Aunt Margaret said quietly. The vinyl booth squeaked as I sat back, mental calculator running. I had maybe $200 in cash at home. Record requests, certified copies, notary fees. We were looking at close to $1,000 in documentation costs alone. Margaret, She was already pulling out her wallet. Don't even start. Linda would never forgive me if I didn't help her daughter fight for what's right. She laid 3 crisp hundreds on the table. Consider it an investment in justice. The morning light caught her silver hair, and for a moment she looked so much like Mother that my throat tightened. I reached for my coffee, using the moment to steady myself. 72 hours, I said, focusing on the numbers, the plan, the steps ahead. We've got 72 hours to prove what they did. My fingers drummed against the diner table as I refreshed the banking app one more time. Same message, different screen. Account access temporarily restricted pending review. A customer service note followed, dripping with corporate sympathy. We apologize for any inconvenience. Please visit your local branch for assistance. You ever notice how "we apologize" usually means someone's about to make your life harder? He's moving faster than I expected, I said, showing Margaret the screen. The morning sun through the blinds felt too bright now, like a spotlight on everything going wrong. Margaret waved over our waitress. Separate checks, please, and I'll need a receipt. She caught my questioning look. Paper trail, Emily, everything documented. I nodded, Mother's voice echoing in my head. Records, beat, recollections. I need to get to the bank before the morning rush. Go. Margaret gathered the photocopies into her leather portfolio. I'll start on the account histories. Meet back here at sunset? The First Capital branch sat like a brick fortress on Main, all columns and confidence. Inside, the air conditioning hit me like a wall of proper behavior. Mrs. Chen, the branch manager, had known me since I opened my first savings account at 16. Her smile today looked professionally pained. I'm so sorry, Emily. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. The hold came down from legal compliance last night. Something about pending estate disputes? I kept my voice steady. Pending estate disputes? That's the exact phrase? Yes. She glanced at her screen. I can't override it without documentation from the estate. Attorney. Estate disputes, not family concerns or account review. I filed that wording away. Father had already involved lawyers. The drive home felt longer than usual, my thoughts racing faster than the speedometer. My phone chirped 3 times before I pulled into the driveway. 3 texts from 3 different cousins, all carrying the same whispered poison. From Janet. We're worried about you. Thomas mentioned your episodes. From Peter. Maybe take some time? Your behavior lately seems unstable. From Rachel. We love you, but the volatility at family gatherings. Episodes? Volatility? I'd organized every holiday for 15 years without raising my voice once. You know that moment when you realize someone's not just moving against you, but trying to erase who you are? Inside, I booted up my laptop and created a new folder, Documentation. Screenshot of each text, message, timestamps, sender information. Then I opened a fresh document and typed, Dear cousin, I appreciate your concern. However, I must correct these characterizations of my behavior. I have maintained consistent employment at Richardson & Associates for 12 years, earning regular promotions. I have hosted 47 documented family gatherings without incident. I request you share specific examples of any concerning behavior, with dates and witnesses. Best regards, Emily. Copy, paste, send to all 3. Document everything. Next, I created a timeline spreadsheet. Professional accomplishments, volunteer work, family event hosting, anything that showed stability and reliability. The facts would speak for themselves. I picked up my phone and dialed James Chen's law office. His father had handled Mother's original estate planning before retiring. Chen & Associates. Hi, Sarah, it's Emily Dalton. I need to schedule an appointment with James for Monday morning. I kept my tone casual, like this was routine estate business. Let me check. Keyboard clicking. He has a 9:30 open. Perfect. Right after Father's meeting. I'll take it. Just a quick review of some family documents. I texted Margaret. Appointment set? Bank records? Her reply came quick. Making copies now. Meet at Riverside Park? Less obvious than the diner. Smart. Public enough to be safe. Private enough to talk. 7 p.m. at the East Bench. I looked at my watch. 6 hours until sunset. Time to split up tasks and start gathering proof. The light through my home office window caught Mother's old letter opener on my desk, the brass one with roses engraved on the handle. I remembered her using it to slice open important documents, always precise, always careful. Watch the details, she used to say. Details win the day. I grabbed my planner and started listing out the hours ahead. Father might have frozen my accounts, and Brother might be poisoning my reputation, but they'd forgotten one thing. I was Mother's daughter, and Mother taught me to keep receipts. Head, paper trails don't lie. Saturday morning hit like a fresh cup of coffee, sharp and clarifying. Margaret and I split the work. She'd handle the bank while I tackled the notary, and Mother's old contacts. Sometimes the best revenge is just good record-keeping. First National's downtown branch was quiet at 9 a.m. Margaret texted that she'd sweet-talked her way to the records department, where an old colleague was printing transfer histories with official stamps. Each document would have that lovely blue seal that makes lawyers sit up straighter. Meanwhile, I sat across from Nancy Chen, our family's longtime notary, spreading out Mother's original estate documents on her desk. The morning light caught the dust motes dancing above the papers. I remember when your mother signed these, Nancy said, adjusting her glasses. She was very specific about equal distribution. Her stamp came down with a satisfying thunk on each certified copy. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about that conversation? I asked. Nancy nodded, already pulling out her official letterhead. I keep detailed notes from every signing. Give me 20 minutes. You know those moments when you feel your mother's hand guiding you? This was one of them. Next stop, Mrs. Patterson's house on Maple Street. She'd been Mother's best friend for 30 years, and I knew she kept everything. Her living room smelled like tea and old books, exactly as it had when I was a kid. Of course I still have Linda's letters, she said, shuffling through a drawer. Ah, here's the one about the estate planning. She was quite concerned about setting up equal guardrails for both her children. The letter was dated 3 months before Mother passed. Mrs. Patterson made a copy, then signed and dated a statement confirming its authenticity. Another piece for our puzzle. Back at my kitchen table, I spread everything out in chronological order. Time to build our case like Mother taught. Me, clean, clear, and impossible to dismiss. The summary sheet came first, bullet points any lawyer could scan in 3 minutes flat. Then the supporting documents, each one tagged and cross-referenced. I rehearsed my responses while driving between errands. Keep it cool, stick to facts. When Father mentions family loyalty, the documents show Mother's clear intentions. If Brother brings up mental stability, my employment and community service. Records demonstrate consistent reliability. But sitting alone in my parked car outside the copy shop, watching people stroll past without a care in the world, something cracked. Just a hairline fracture at first, then spreading like ice on a winter windshield. The weight of it all pressed down. The texts, the whispers, the blank space on that family photo wall. Maybe it would be easier to just let go. Accept the erasure. Stop fighting the tide of family opinion. The steering wheel felt cool under my forehead as I let myself imagine walking away. I met Margaret at our usual bench in Riverside Park just as the sun started sinking. The river rolled past, steady and sure, while I admitted my moment of weakness. I almost gave up today, I whispered, just for a minute, in my car. It hurts so much, Margaret. She took my hand, her grip firm and warm. Of course it hurts, but silence has a price too. Every time we swallow an injustice, we tell the next generation it's okay to serve them the same bitter meal. I wiped my eyes with my free hand, nodding. The river kept flowing, reminding me that everything passes, pain and peace alike. Besides, Margaret added with a gentle squeeze, your mother didn't raise a doormat. That got a watery laugh out of me. No, she certainly didn't. We scheduled one final review for Sunday morning. A last check of our evidence packet before the Monday showdown. Back home, I slipped everything into my fireproof lockbox, each document another brick in our wall of truth. I ran my fingers over the box's cool metal surface. Mother's voice echoed in my memory. The truth doesn't shout, dear. It just waits to be discovered. Sunday morning crept in like a cat, all soft footsteps and shadows. I'd barely slept, but it didn't matter. My mind was crystal clear as I watched the printer hum to life at 4:45 a.m. You know that strange clarity that comes with purpose? That's where I was living. The basement office felt like a war room, papers arranged in precise stacks across my old drafting table. Each document told its part of the story. Bank statements showing transfers to cover Brother's casino markers, Mother's estate provisions with her careful annotations, even her margin notes about equal shares, no exceptions. Check the third set against the master copy, Margaret said from her perch by the filing cabinet. We'd been at it since before dawn, making triplicates of everything. Can't be too careful when you're building a case like this. I lifted the cover letter, our roadmap through the evidence, and read it aloud one more time. Analysis of enclosed documents reveals systematic misuse of estate funds beginning March 15th, with initial transfer of $50,000 to satisfy outstanding gambling debt at Golden Sands Casino. Good, Margaret nodded. Clear and factual, no emotion. The chain of custody logs were my own touch. Mother taught me about documentation when I helped organize her social committee records. Paper trails need their own paper trails, she'd say with a wink. Now I labeled each exhibit, noting when and where we'd obtained it, who had handled it, where copies were stored. "Let's run it again," Margaret suggested, settling into Father's role while I took my position by the window. Early morning light painted long shadows across the carpet. "The estate modifications are already prepared," she said, mimicking Father's clipped tone. "This is merely attention-seeking behavior." I kept my voice steady, just like we'd practiced. "The documents demonstrate clear violation of the original estate, provisions specifically regarding gambling debt coverage. You're trying to destroy this family. The records speak for themselves. Would you like to review the transfer timeline?" We went through every scenario we could imagine. The lawyer asking about document authenticity, Father claiming I'd fabricated evidence, Brother suggesting emotional instability had clouded my judgment. Around 7, I slipped the complete packet into my messenger bag, the same one Mother gave me when I started my first office job. "Always look professional when you're standing your ground," she'd advised. The backup set went into Margaret's canvas tote, which she patted with satisfaction. "Redundancy is security," she said, and I had to smile. She sounded just like Mother. I followed her upstairs to the attic, pausing to run my hand across the cedar chest's smooth lid. "Thanks for keeping her papers safe," I whispered. Through the dusty window, I could see the sky turning that particular shade of Sunday morning blue. Margaret checked her watch. 23 hours and counting. My phone buzzed. An automated calendar reminder from Harrison and Associates, confirming our 9 a.m. appointment Monday. The formal language felt like armor. Re-estate of Linda Dalton. Document review. I was reaching to acknowledge it when another message flashed across my screen. Father's name made my stomach clench. "Let this go." 3 words. But I felt the weight behind them, the threat wrapped in false concern, the assumption that I'd fold like I always had before. Margaret read it over my shoulder and made a sound somewhere between a snort and a growl. "Well, that's getting printed and added to the evidence pile." "Copy that," I said, zipping my messenger bag with perhaps a bit more force than necessary. The sound was satisfying, like sealing up all those years of being the good daughter, the one who never made waves. You ever notice how some threats have the opposite effect? Instead of scaring you, they just confirm you're on the right track? I hefted the bag onto my shoulder, feeling the solid weight of truth inside. Mother's voice whispered in my memory, "Standing up isn't standing against. It's standing for something." For her, for her wishes, for the daughter she raised me to be. I took one last look at the cedar chest before turning off the attic light. 23 hours until Monday morning. 23 hours until Let This Go met. Here are the facts. 9 a.m. sharp. The Harrison and Associates lobby hadn't changed since Mother brought me here decades ago to witness her will signing. Same leather chairs, same watercolor landscapes, same faint smell of toner and coffee. Funny how some places freeze in time, waiting for history to repeat itself. Margaret squeezed my arm as we checked in. "Right on schedule," she murmured, and I caught the double meaning. We'd timed this down to the minute, knowing Father and Brother would arrive early to set the tone. "Ms. Dalton?" The receptionist's voice was professional calm. "They're ready for you in the main conference room." You know that moment when you're about to step into something big? When your heart wants to race, but you force it steady? That was me, adjusting my messenger bag strap, feeling the weight of Mother's truth against my hip. Through the glass walls, I could see them, Father and Brother, heads together like co-conspirators, radiating that particular brand of entitled confidence that comes from never being challenged. Brother wore his new Rolex like a shield. Father had his reasonable man expression firmly in place. "Good morning," I said, keeping my voice neutral as Margaret and I entered. Brother's smirk flickered for just a second when he saw her. They hadn't counted on witnesses. The conference room was all polished mahogany and morning sun. Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer since before I was born, sat at the head of the table, reading glasses perched on his nose. I remembered Mother saying he was particular about documentation. "Emily," Father started, using his boardroom voice, "this really isn't—" I didn't let him finish. Instead, I placed 2 identical packets on the table, clean, professional, indexed. One for Mr. Harrison, one for reference. 3 points for review, I said, sliding the first packet toward the lawyer. The leather chair felt solid beneath me as I sat. First, Mother's original estate plan with specific provisions against gambling, encumbrances. Second, unauthorized transfers made in violation of those provisions. Third, a complete timeline matching those transfers to Brother's casino markers. Brother's face tightened. Family matters allow for discretion. Please note page 4, I continued, speaking to Mr. Harrison. Mother's handwritten margin note regarding gambling restrictions. Would you read it aloud? Father attempted what I'm sure he thought was a benevolent smile. Now, Emily, your mother understood. The transfers, I pressed on, hands steady on my bag's strap. Each one corresponds to a ledger entry. The dates and amounts are highlighted in yellow. Mr. Harrison opened the folder. I watched his eyebrows draw together as he scanned the first page, then the second. His hand reached for a thick statute book on the credenza behind him. You could have heard a pin drop in that room, the kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears. Father's smile had vanished. Brother's Rolex caught the sun as his fingers drummed once, twice on the table. Margaret sat beside me, straight-backed and still, every inch our mother's sister. Her presence felt like a shield against the waves of controlled fury coming from across the table. Mr. Harrison's glasses reflected the morning light as he looked from the documents to Father, then back again. The statute book's pages whispered as he found what he was looking for. The ticking of Brother's watch seemed to grow louder with each passing second. Funny how time can stretch like taffy when you're waiting for truth to land. Father cleared his throat, that same sound he'd made before announcing my erasure at the reunion. But this time, I wasn't there to absorb the blow. This time, I had Mother's papers, her words, her wishes laid out in black and white. Remember what I said about threats sometimes having the opposite effect? Well, evidence has a similar power. When it's clean, when it's clear, when it's carefully organized in chronological order with supporting documentation. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began to read. Mr. Harrison's reading glasses caught the light as he worked through my documentation. You could practically see the timeline crystallizing in his mind as he flipped between tabs, each color-coded section adding another piece to the puzzle. His shoulders, which had started in that polite, neutral position, lawyer's perfect, began to shift forward with growing interest. These transfer dates, he said, tapping a yellow highlight, they align precisely with the casino marker deadlines? Yes, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Each withdrawal corresponds to a marker payment within 48 hours. Brother's heel started that nervous bounce I remembered from childhood confrontations, the same tell he'd had when Mother caught him raiding her purse at 16. Some habits don't change, they just get more expensive. Ms. Dalton, Mr. Harrison continued, can you confirm when you obtained these records? I maintained copies of all original documentation in Mother's cedar chest since her passing. The familiar scent of that chest seemed to float between us. Aunt Margaret can verify the chronology of my archival process. Margaret nodded, her presence as solid as oak. Emily cataloged everything immediately after the memorial. I witnessed her organization system personally. Father's complexion had taken on that gray cast I'd seen at Mother's funeral. His fingers kept straightening his tie, though it hadn't moved. Regarding the revised estate plan, I said, sliding another tab forward. I'd appreciate verification of the signature dates and witnesses. I produced my chain of custody log. These certified copies have been notarized to prevent any suggestion of tampering. Mr. Harrison's eyebrows lifted at the thoroughness. He began comparing signatures, dates, and notary stamps between documents. The room felt like it was holding its breath. There's a rather significant transfer here, he said finally, pointing to a line item dated 3 weeks before probate was complete. He looked at Father. "Can you explain the timing of that transaction?" Father's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "We had temporary liquidity concerns. 1, 2, 3. I counted the beats silently, letting the weakness of that explanation settle into the air. "The estate was fully solvent," I said quietly. "The bank statements confirm it." I reached into my bag and placed one final exhibit at the edge of the table. "This is the original liquidity report, dated the same week." Brother's Rolex caught the sun as his hand clenched. Father's tie straightening became more pronounced. Mr. Harrison picked up the liquidity report, comparing it against the transfer timeline. His posture had completely transformed from professional courtesy to focused concern. When he looked up, his gaze had that sharp clarity lawyers get when they spot something seriously wrong. "Mr. Dalton," he said to Father, "I need to understand why these specific transfers were executed despite the explicit restrictions in your wife's estate plan." The room's energy shifted like a compass finding true north. You could feel the power dynamic realigning as Father struggled to form a response that wouldn't make things worse. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, watching the truth do its own work. Sometimes the strongest position is simply to be quiet and let documents speak for themselves. I held myself perfectly still as Mr. Harrison closed the last folder with deliberate care. 25 years of legal practice showed in how he removed his glasses, placed them precisely on the mahogany table, and leaned forward with the kind of measured attention that signals a major shift in proceedings. "Based on these documents," he said, choosing each word carefully, "I have serious concerns about the validity of any proposed changes to the estate." He turned slightly toward Father. "More critically, the pattern of transfers linked to gambling activities appears to breach several explicit provisions of the original plan." The air conditioning hummed in the silence that followed. I watched Brother's face twist through a kaleidoscope of emotions before landing on desperate indignation. "This is ridiculous," he burst out. "Those transfers to Golden Sands were perfectly legitimate." My heart skipped. There it was, the account name I'd circled in Mother's ledger, now confirmed by his own mouth. I kept my expression neutral, but Aunt Margaret's small intake of breath told me she'd caught it too. "I don't believe anyone mentioned Golden Sands Resort and Casino by name," I said softly. I slid Mother's annotated ledger forward, her neat handwriting showing that exact business name with a warning note beside it. Mr. Harrison picked up the ledger, comparing the entry to his earlier notes. "This is particularly concerning," he said. "Given the timing and amounts involved, we need to place an immediate hold on all questionable distributions pending a complete review." Father's composure finally cracked. The careful mask he'd worn through decades of business. Dealings slipped, revealing something raw and panicked underneath. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair as if the floor was tilting beneath him. "Now wait just a minute," he started, but Mr. Harrison was already reaching for his phone. "Sandra," he said to his assistant, "please bring in Ms. Chen with the notary kit and prepare to document our findings." He listened briefly. "Yes, all relevant affidavits, and we'll need certified copies." I watched Father seem to age 10 years in those few seconds. The confident patriarch who'd tried to write me out of existence was dissolving before my eyes. Brother had gone completely still, his earlier nervous energy frozen into something closer to shock. The door opened with a soft click as the receptionist returned with a younger woman carrying a leather portfolio. They efficiently arranged their materials while Mr. Harrison continued making notes. I drew a careful breath. "Given these developments," I said, my voice steady, "I formally request restoration of Mother's original estate plan, pending full review." I met Mr. Harrison's eyes. "And I'd like my personal accounts unfrozen, please." The lawyer nodded, already drafting on his legal pad. "That would be appropriate, yes. We'll need statements from all parties." He looked up at Father, who sat with his hands now folded in his lap, completely silent. "Mr. Dalton, Do you wish to make any statement before we proceed? Father's mouth worked for a moment, but no words came. I recognized the expression. It was the same one he'd worn when Mother had confronted him about his first affair 20 years ago. The look of a man realizing his carefully constructed narrative was crumbling beyond repair. The notary uncapped her pen with a small click that seemed to echo in the weighted silence. "Shall we begin with the affidavits?" she asked. I maintained my posture of calm attention as papers were arranged and statements prepared. Inside, a lifetime of suppressed validation was rising like a tide, but I kept it contained. Mother had always said justice doesn't need theatrics. It just needs sunlight and good records. Mr. Harrison began dictating the first finding for transcription. Regarding the estate of Linda Marie Dalton, pursuant to evidence presented this 10th day of August, I watched Father's hands clench tighter as each word fell into place, making official what he'd tried so hard to hide. The morning sun slanted through the windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, and I thought about how truth, like dust, has a way of settling exactly where it belongs. Mr. Harrison rose from his chair, straightening his tie. For the record, the original estate plan established by Linda Marie Dalton will remain in full force pending formal review. He paused, shuffling through the documented transfers. Additionally, given the nature of these transactions, I'm obligated to notify several oversight bodies regarding the gambling-linked distributions. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt. You know that moment when you can actually see karma arriving? This was it. Brother's face drained of color. You can't. Those records are private. Not when they involve estate funds, Mr. Harrison cut in. The Gaming Commission, the State Bar Association, and the Banking Oversight Board will all receive copies. He glanced at his watch. My staff will begin processing those notifications within the hour. A small sound escaped Father's throat, something between a cough and a groan. The carefully constructed wall of family respectability was crumbling, brick by brick. Every country club whisper about Brother's investment losses would soon crystallize into documented fact. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it just quietly opens the right filing cabinets. Mr. Harrison turned to his assistant. "Sandra, please retrieve Mrs. Dalton's personal effects envelope from the secure storage." He made a note in the margin of his legal pad. The locket, specifically, should be returned to the rightful heir immediately. I remembered that locket, Mother wearing it at every holiday, the warm gold catching Christmas lights as she leaned over to check the turkey. The last time I'd seen it was during the estate inventory, before it vanished into temporary storage with Father's other convenient arrangements. Sandra returned with a cream-colored envelope, handling it with white-gloved hands. "If you'll sign here, Ms. Dalton," she said, indicating a receipt line. My signature was steady. The envelope's seal broke with a crisp sound that seemed to punctuate the morning's revelations. The locket emerged, still gleaming, Mother's initials engraved on one side, her favorite psalm reference on the other. Amazing how something so small could carry such weight. "The chain appears intact," Mr. Harrison noted for the record. "Property restored to designated heir as per original documentation." I lifted the locket, its gold warm against my fingertips. Ever try to measure victory in ounces? This one weighed exactly as much as Mother's wisdom proved right. Aunt Margaret stepped close, her hand finding my shoulder. This was her victory too, the quiet aunt who'd stood witness while others looked away. "Let me help you with the clasp," she said softly. The locket settled against my throat as Brother's phone began buzzing. Probably the first ripple of news spreading through his carefully maintained network. He jabbed at the screen with shaking fingers, then shoved back his chair. "This isn't, you can't just—" The words scattered like marbles on hardwood. Father remained seated, staring at his hands. The powerful man who'd tried to erase me with a text message now couldn't even meet my eyes. You'd think revenge would taste sweeter, but honestly, I just felt clean. Like after a long-needed rain, I gathered my evidence packet, tucking Mother's original notes carefully inside. "Thank you for your time this morning, Mr. Harrison," I said. My voice came out clear and professional. Mother would have approved. Aunt Margaret and I moved toward the door. I passed father and brother without breaking stride or offering a parting shot. Some silences speak volumes, and this one was writing a whole library about consequences. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As we descended, I touched the locket, feeling its familiar weight and warmth against my collarbone. "Mother used to say a good name was worth more than gold," I told Aunt Margaret. Guess she was right about that, too. We stepped out into morning sunlight that seemed to wash everything clean. The locket caught the light, throwing back a small flash, like a wink from Mother herself. You can try to erase someone's story, but truth has a way of writing itself back in bold.